Welcome to The Next Interview Show. Every week, Dolan sits down with industry game changers, visionary founders, and powerhouse executives to uncover the raw truth behind what it really takes to lead. On this week's show,
I think it's the best time to be a leader because if you can distinguish yourself by engaging people in a pattern of positive growth that you're seeking to lead, they will be the most motivated workforce on the planet.
This episode is sponsored by The Power of You, a weekly leadership deep dive brought to you by Blaine Bartlett and me. For information on how to subscribe and gain access to our library of content, visit thenextinterview.com or click the link in the show notes. Now let's get to the next interview.
Welcome to the Next Interview Show podcast. I'm Dolan White. As the preceding announcer announced, I'm the host of the podcast, and I'm blessed today. I get to have a great conversation with Andrew Oxley and from the Oxley Group. So, as a matter of fact, it happens to be. And today we're gonna talk about colors and faces, and we're gonna spend a little time inside of your book, Andrew, if that's all right with you.
Absolutely. But
I want to dive into. Gosh, I've heard a couple of your interviews. I read the book. It's dog-eared. I've got some questions in the book, and we'll be passing. By the way, handing this to my daughter-in-law, who leads a company, to go here.
Good.
Here's your homework assignment, sweetheart. So first thing is just I want to extend some gratitude. There's 1,000 other things you could be doing with your time. You're here hanging out with me to have this conversation. I'm grateful to meet you. And then grateful just to spend some time together. So thank you for doing this today.
I'm very, very happy to be here.
Good. Great. Thank you. Well, we'll see how that is at the end of the interview. I mean, I got like 30 minutes to break that. So we'll see how that goes. So for people who don't know you, and the bit that I've gotten to know you, listening to a couple of interviews and the bit of research that I've done on you before we got here, is veritably meaningless. I would love for you to, you've got a really interesting background kind of in your journey to where you are today and what you're doing.
Yeah.
I would love just to take the first few minutes and just share that journey, because I think that's important to leaders, because as people go into leadership, managing and leading is all about that journey and the things that we bring with us to get there. So
yeah. Without question. And, I like to say I'm a recovering engineer. I guess we have that in common. I actually don't really know why I became an engineer, other than it came really easy to me.
Wow.
But it was not in my behavioral wheelhouse, which meant that I really was pretty bored with it. Once I'd start solving problems, and I'd get about 70% of the way there, and I was like, it's probably good enough. Which is not what you want with people building bridges and large structures, So
probably not.
So in my final year of engineering school, I had this marketing professor, business professor, who invited me to the front of the class, which was never a good thing when in my college career, when a professor invited me up to talk. And he said to me, "Mr. Oxley, will you stay after class?" I was like, "Yes." He's like, "I've been reviewing your transcript," and I said, "Oh no." And he said, "You're not exactly at the top of your engineering class." And I said, I am aware of this, actually. He said, "You are, however, at the top of this class." And I was like, "Oh, that's pretty cool. That never happened to me before." And he said, "It occurs to me you should not be an engineer after you graduate." Well, I said, "Professor, that's a problem. I'm in my 4th year." He said, "Go sell something technical." And I didn't even know that was a thing at that time. So,
wow.
I actually applied to some sales jobs for technical products, ended up selling commercial air conditioning for Trane Canada, running a large commercial division for them in Toronto. And Toronto was going through a building boom at the time. So I like to think success has a lot to do with luck. And I was lucky I was in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of early commercial success and our team. And that enabled me to have my midlife crisis early, I like to say. I woke up one day and I picked up the Globe and Mail, which is like the Wall Street Journal of Canada. And in the bottom corner, there's this thing called Your Morning Smile. And this particular morning, the Morning Smile was, with the problem with the rat race is even if you win, you're still a rat. And I remember shaving that morning and looking in the mirror thinking, I'm just going to be a big fat rat. That's all I'm going to be. I'm going to be a big fat rat sitting up here in Toronto, and I don't want to be a rat. And I did something that I didn't actually know how wise it was. I didn't know the answer to this question. I cut the little saying out and I sellotaped it from, I didn't have a laminating machine. I sellotaped it and I stuck it in my wallet. And every time I got something in my wallet, I looked at that and say, how do I change this? How do I change this? How do I change this? Now, the reason this is important is, and this is something I want your listeners to hear, the problem we get into in life is that we come across questions we don't know the answers to. And because we don't know the answers to them, we get busy with what we do know. And it's a very seductive thing to do, because well, what am I supposed to do with it? I don't know the answer to that question.
Right.
Well, I didn't. I hung with the question. Now, I actually came up with a bad answer, but I'm glad I came up with a bad answer because it got me to where I am today. I thought my problem was my job. My problem was not my job. But my problem was me. I was the problem. So if your listeners are frustrated where they are, I'm not saying there aren't good companies, bad companies, better companies, better jobs, but inevitably, when I work with leaders, and we've literally worked with thousands and thousands of leaders now, the problem is not usually the job. It's the way we're executing the job. And the questions we need to answer are not the questions we know the answers to. They're the questions we don't know the answers to.
Right.
And so I went on this circuitous journey to try to figure out how to fix myself. And in the process, I learned some very practical tools that ended up being super helpful to a lot of other leaders, because most people, not all, but most people in the space in which I operate, executive and leadership coaching, come to it from a very theoretical or educational background.
Right.
Which is not bad, but it's not practical. So
Agreed.
I don't have that background. I have no pedigree. I have a lot of knowledge from studying what works and doesn't work literally over 30 years now. And, you don't be that smart. If you study enough people, you start to figure out what the pattern is. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that statement, because I think it's funny. We had a conversation a couple of days ago with a buddy, and we were talking about the lessons that I get people who will ping, like I'll get a ping inside of LinkedIn. Hey, I've looked at your profile and I can solve all of your problems.
Oh yeah.
And I kind of go, first of all, you don't know me. I don't know that you've actually done it. And because of that, I don't really know that you can actually say, what are my problems? Can anybody tell me what exactly is my problem? So I agree with you. I have my pedigree is music. That's my background, and discovered that you can't put hot dogs in the fridge with music as easy as you can doing other stuff.
That is true.
And so my career went elsewhere in my life. So when you were really interested in it, because as you were going from in your class in engineering to that moment where, and I had that one moment in my career once where somebody said, you probably shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Probably should go do this. God bless them for having that moment with us and the tenacity to tell us. And you went off to discover one of the things that you just mentioned just in passing, Andrew, was talking about, the and I want to come back to things we don't know, but fixing, it turned out that you had to step back and say, hey, it's me.
Yeah.
And I think that's, if you're okay with it, I'd love to explore that a little bit. So how did you, when you how did you step back and say, okay, what is this? Right? Because a lot of people tend to go, it's external.
Yeah.
There's that natural propensity.
Yeah. And I think that's where I started, right?
Yeah.
I started with the external, and I actually started a company doing training and
Sure.
all sorts of different training, which is hilarious, because I would have been elected the most likely to fall asleep during training in my first career. It was usually taught by somebody who was incredibly boring and incredibly, had no idea what I did or what anyone in the class did, and they were trying to be expert, like you said, right? So anyway, so what happened was I actually got invited to a 3-day workshop out in Las Vegas, being led by a gentleman by the name of Bob Proctor. And Bob was a giant in the personal growth and development industry. He's out of Toronto, Canada. I actually came from Toronto, went to Atlanta, and then met Bob in Las Vegas. And Bob was one of my first big mentors. He had this saying he used to say. he used to say that the amount of progress you make in your life will be directly proportional to the amount of honesty you can accept about yourself.
Yeah.
He went on to tell me he did not think I was particularly honest at all. And
Did
so
he really?
yeah. Oh, yeah. And so I was like, what are you
Wow.
talking about? So he basically was the first one to turn the mirror on me, both through his teaching and actually, I actually brought him to Atlanta, I think about 7 times to speak to groups. And I just put groups together for him to come talk to,
Oh, fantastic.
just so I could have him mentor me, really.
Sure.
And he, just an incredible guy. Anyway, so the answer to your question is the way I found out it was me was somebody turned the mirror on me.
Sure.
And caused me to, really self-assess how I was approaching what I was doing.
Right.
And that was a seminal moment for me. I don't think I've been without a coach now for since that day, which would be about 28 years ago. I've had a coach nearly every day of my life since then, in some way, shape, or form. I've got one right now, because it's the best money you can spend is having someone that can point out to you what you can't see yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that. We'll have another conversation about Bob. Bob and I were dear friends.
Oh, were you really?
Yeah. So we were dear friends, and his son, Brian, and Corey, and Linda.
Now,
Been
how
to
did
his
you meet
house?
Bob?
And so knew Bob, knew him deeply. So,
okay. Were you in the insurance industry? Where did you meet you?
No. It's I can,
Okay.
rather than, we could completely derail the listeners on, now here's how I met Bob. Let me tell you some Bob stories.
Yeah.
But to your point, Bob would be the guy that would spin the table back on you and call it.
He was not the kinder, gentler mentor.
No. After the interview, I'll tell you a Bob story. So,
Okay. Yeah.
So no, but to your point, I think, and I really want to kind of reemphasize something that you said, is that one of the things that I think that's really critically important, and it's interesting that you've leaned in on that. And similarly in my life, we don't, there has to be that person in our life. We are the sum of, I've been teaching my sons this latest phrase, right? We're the sum total of the 5 people we hang out with the most.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So that which happens to be a Bobism too, by the way. So the idea of, one, stay in a study, and the second is have a mentor, and have someone who's going to call you on your stuff, right? And help you continue to progress. Age has no barrier, right? As a matter of fact, I think as the older I get, the more important that mentor becomes in my life.
And I talk to people all the time. I always say, well, I can't afford a coach. Well, let me give you, we live in the most remarkable time. First of all, you have podcasts like this, you have books you can read, but we have this new brilliant thing called AI now. And you could actually build an AI persona like, say, Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs could be your mentor and just say, I want you to take on the persona of Steve Jobs, and I want you to ask me questions until you identify the bias with which I'm bringing to my decision-making or whatever. And so you can be mentored by people who are no longer alive.
Yeah. Yeah. That's brilliant. That's so true, right? There is a perception of what AI does, and it has I won't say limitless, but there's a lot of potential there with what happens inside of AI.
Yeah, for sure.
So as you were on that journey, one of the things the other thing, and thank you for that, by the way, for throwing Bob into the mix. But
he gave me a lot.
Pardon me?
He gave me a lot.
Bob was left a divot in my left shoulder, but we'll tell you that story later. The other thing I wanted to kind of just talk about was, I think that you said something that's being a musician. I'm still a musician and do studio stuff. I call it a mic drop. There's a mic drop. There's the thing that you just said, Andrew, which was we have a tendency to ground into things that we know.
Yeah.
And so when you're working with and it's a challenge, right? To get people to think differently, to kind of step out of their comfort and, to move into things they don't know. When you're working with, your clients and, the organizations that you work with, I would imagine you've probably crossed that challenge once or twice in your, in your storied career doing all these things. How do you challenge that thought process to get somebody that kind of, let's let's look at this a little differently, and let's kind of, let's move forward and think about what we don't know.
Yeah, and I think part of the problem we run into, it has to do with a fundamental misunderstanding of leadership in general. And we like to say leader is only required when there's a journey involved. So if you're going on a journey, you need a leader. But if you're not going on a journey, you don't need a leader. If we're just going to where we've gone before, we can get a manager to do that. Nothing against management. Management's important, but we talk more about leadership today because of the fact that the environment we find ourselves is consistently shifting, right? So to go on a journey, you need three things. You need to know where you are, you need to know where you're going, you have to have a plan. Well, what I find most leaders do is they start with the plan. With the presumption is that everybody knows where we are and everybody knows where we want to go. And I found that neither is actually true. And even if people buy into where we're going, which also not usually true, because I've walked around organizations and I've asked, what are you trying to accomplish here? And they're like, I don't know, just trying to get through the day, So we talked about purpose and so the idea of the destination, and you have to be passionate about the achievement of the destination. Well, if I'm not passionate as a leader, there's no way in Hades I'm ever going to get anyone else passionate. So that's the first. So you got to have a destination, but then you have to know where you are. And the problem with this is that getting people to identify where they're starting from is incredibly difficult, because even in occupations that are without question objectively able to be measured, like sales, for example, I could agree that my sales are horrible, but I might disagree why. So I don't even agree. You're my boss. You're coaching me, but I love you, Dolan, but you're not doing my job, and you don't really understand what I do. So I'm going to pretend I'm listening to you, but the solutions you're giving me, the plan you're giving me, is not going to help, because that's
sure.
So you have to. We actually say the hardest work you can do is getting leaders to self-identify, either for themselves or their team. Get their team to identify what is actually the problem. And why do we care if it's solved in the first place? What's the destination we're headed towards? Right. Most leaders do not set goals that they're passionate about achieving. And if you're familiar with Bob's stuff, he was all about, you got a goal you're crazy passionate about. Yeah. And so, when I work with leaders, they're actually talking about stuff and they don't really give a crap. It's just a number. And when they hit that number, they're going to hit another number. So why, at some point, your team goes, so this doesn't matter how hard we work, because as soon as we hit your goal, we're going to have another goal. So we'll just do the best we can. Right. And so to answer your question, it really is getting people to slow down and actually pull apart the problem and actually identify what's actually happening, not presume that there's an agreement amongst the team as to what the actual obstacle is.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, Andrew, because I think that's in a lot of organizations, and those that I coach that have come across, that's a common thing. There's an assumption that everybody's familiar with where we are and this is where we're going to go, and therefore let's do who, what, how, strategy, tactics, and let's go get this done. Right. Without that, when you're working, one of the things that I mentioned kind of coming into it was I want to spend a little bit of time before we talk about the book. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about purpose. Yeah. Because there is that conundrum around, why am I doing this? What's the purpose of doing this? Right. So what advice there, and there's two sides. There's your side as you're working with teams. There is also the side of that manager, lead, depends upon where they are in the organization, manager, leader in the organization, right? We all wear 3 badges, do, manage, and lead, who may not understand, we're going to, our purpose is to raise sales 10%. Well, that's not your purpose. No. That's a thing. Yeah. That's a thing. So how do you help that individual understand the difference between the thing and purpose?
Yeah. And so I would say, I'll do this by way of a story. We were working with a company by the name of Mohawk Carpets. You're probably familiar with Mohawk. The largest floor covering manufacturer in the world. And I'll give a lot of kudos to a client I had there. His name was Tim Gray, and Tim ran their customer service group. So he was the director of customer service. He had 2 managers at different call centers, about 300, 400 employees.
Sure.
And at the time, heavy, human contact with the dealer network. And so he was having difficulty because his workforce was considered, his department was considered the starting place for everything Mohawk. So if you wanted to work for Mohawk, you went to work for customer service because it was easy to get in because they had high turnover, which meant that you could go work somewhere else. So he was constantly having to train people. And so we started working, and Tim was an ideal client because he understood the concepts we were talking about. So we had this conversation around, well, why should they care? See, this is the first question a leader needs to ask, like, why should they care? And he's like, well, they don't care. I'm like, but why would they? What would cause them to care?
Yeah.
And so I said, what's the mission of your group? And he actually had a mission. He said, to create the best customer service group in the world. I said, how are you doing on that? He said, we suck. We're not doing well at all. We're working hard and we have good people, but we're not like our turnover is our churn is huge. And I said, so we got to make the mission something that speaks to the agents.
Right.
Now, yes, you want to have a great customer service group. And all it was one simple change. He said, we want to have the best customer service in the world by creating customer service agents that have purpose and direction and a career at this company.
Wow.
And so, so now here's the problem. Now, when you say that, I said, well, how do we do that? So then he had to create this entire career development path for his customer service agents. And I would say over the course of about 12 months, they were able to completely flip the culture of that organization where people, they still left, but they had a huge sucking sound of sucking great people into that organization because they'd be known as the place you go to work if you want to get developed. And sometimes people would leave the customer service group and come back because they're not like you guys over there. I want to come back and work in customer service.
Oh, wow.
So, when you're trying to create a purpose, I think the thing you have to do is you have to ask questions like, what is the wrong in our industry, in our group, in what we do that, if righted, would make a difference in the lives that people do, of the people that do this job? What is the thing that I don't like about our industry that shouldn't be so, but it is? And when you're setting this as your purpose, of course, purposes are big and they're bold and you don't have to know how to get there. You just have to have it as an ideal you're striving for.
Right.
And so then you can align metrics to that. Now, the great thing about that is that when you align the metrics, then when you achieve a metric, it's not like people go, we're done. Because no, we're not done, because we're trying to create this organization that people are passionate to be part of, that they can develop. So there's a whole new group of people coming in now that we have to do that for as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's very cool, Andrew. One of the things that, I like that whole concept of which is not necessarily knowing how you're going to do it. And I think from a leader's perspective, there's just a thing I talk about every now and then called the 5 lies. And one of the 5 lies is leaders are, as a leader, I'm expected to have all the answers.
Oh, yeah.
Right. That's one of the 5 lies. And I try to keep things at my age. I keep things down to 5 or less, because the past 5, I'm out. I got nothing for you. I'm not going to remember it. So I think it's really interesting. There is amount of discomfort. Because there's vulnerability that comes into, I don't know all the steps to get to this place that we're going to.
Yeah.
But we can do this. We can do this together. Yes.
Yeah. Bob used to say, if you know how to get to where you're going to the wrong place. Yeah. I mean, you're going to somewhere you've been before.
Right.
And so, I think the purpose of setting a goal is to learn new things. One of the things that I fundamentally believe, and I years ago I was doing some work at CNN, and I remember I was doing a program we'd written for CNN called Retaining Top Talent, because they're having issues with retention, as most organizations do. Sure. And they wanted to address that. And so that this leader, this mid-level manager said, what happens if you've lost your passion? And, the beautiful thing about what I do is I get asked really tough questions. And
wow.
I remember that particular day, I gave him an answer, but even as I gave him an answer, I thought, this is not a great answer. But see, I believe that the questions you get asked are the fuel for future learning. So I started, so what do you do if you've lost your passion? Like I know, what I realized is, well, why have you lost your passion? And inevitably what happens as we get older and as we become more successful, we start to try to get comfortable. And comfort is the antithesis to growth. And growth, if you go and interview people and tell me about the times when you felt the most alive in your life, it was when you were first married, first house, first child.
Yes. Yeah.
It's always things that you'd never done before. So by definition, we feel the most alive, the most passionate when we're doing new things. But as we get older, we stop doing new things. We start trying to put little barriers up to that, and we become comfortable. And then we wonder why we don't feel very passionate anymore.
Right.
So now I'm not saying you should get remarried. That's not my point.
Sure.
What I'm suggesting, well, unless you want to, of course, but the point is, like if you're married, what are you doing new? What can you go do? What new experiences can you go have? Where can you travel to? If you're in your career, what goals can you set that are exciting to you? In your relationships, what are you doing that is new and you're like, you know what? I don't know how to do that, but sure would be fun to figure that out.
Right.
What hobbies are you involved in that you're learning in?
Right.
So this is where passion comes from. So I really think, as leaders, as you become more successful, you become more comfortable. The more comfortable you become, the more you resist change. The more you resist change, the less passionate you will be about anything that's happening in your life. And the antidote is simple: figure out what you want.
Yeah, I really like that, because I love that path, that stitch, that thread that stitches all of that together. Because it really is true, because it is very easy to get comfortable, in particularly and older has nothing to do with age per se.
Right.
Older in a position or older in a role, it gets very easy to get very comfortable, and this is how I've always done it. This is how we're always going to do it, and we're not going to really worry about anything else. And it does become rote. Right.
Yeah.
It's that thing where I go home at the end of the night and my wife would say, "So what did you do today?" And I kind of went, "Well, stuff."
Yeah.
Did you do anything that mattered? Not really.
Yeah. That kills the human spirit, doesn't it?
Oh, it's terrible.
Yeah.
It's terrible. I've been there, was there a couple of times in my career and what happens, to your point, which it's interesting you touched on retention, because what happens at that point is when we're not fulfilled, we're not challenged, and there is no path, no visible path, or even a path yet or a hint of a path.
Right.
It's easy for us to pull the ripcord and either check out at work or check out completely and go find something else to do.
Yeah.
And they're both deadly to an organization. So
without question.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So when one of the things, if you don't mind, that I've got a shameless plug for the book. I'll hold it up. We are going to come back to that. We'll get to the book, The Four Faces. But inside of, so in my career, my 30 some odd years as an engineer, in technology and all this stuff that I did, I also got to work to enact change in places like Fox and Disney and blah, blah, blah. And it's a different body. And you just talked about CNN, right? Which is, there's two sides to enacting change. There's that downward pressure from people above who care about an outcome. They're not so concerned about as Bob used to call it, also the woo-woo, right? The woo-woo in the middle. And then there's that upward pressure from the bottom. So if you're a manager, director, VP person, kind of I call it kind of that chewy nougat layer, right? And you're in enacting change. You're enacting up and down and sideways, right? There's that 360-degree circle. So what's your counsel to that individual? Because there has to be moments of frustration, moments of feeling of no support, feeling of why the heck am I doing this?
Yeah. Maybe more than moments. Maybe continual. I had somebody ask me a while back. They said, "Well, why is the title of the book The Four Faces of Frustration?" I said, "Because frustration is a symptom of something else." But it's like a continual experience. If you're in leadership, you are going to be frustrated because there is a gap between where you are and where you want to be. But you have to recognize it's actually a tension. if you're in leadership, it's not really a problem to be solved. It's a tension to be managed because there's always going to be a gap. If there's not a gap, you're not required anymore. So this is probably the best time, and leaders who listen to this, they may disagree. I think it's the best time to be a leader because if you can distinguish yourself by engaging people in a pattern of positive growth that you're seeking to lead, they will be the most motivated workforce on the planet. Now, when I say that to people, they're like, have you met young people today? And I'm like, yeah, I've met a bunch of them. And there's some highly motivated people out there, but they will not be motivated by what you and I were motivated by.
Right.
They'll work harder for a cause than a paycheck. Yeah. And so, we're trying to say, if you work hard, you can have my job one day. And they're looking at you and they're like, I don't want your job. Your job looks like hell on earth. I mean, you work all the time. You don't have any life. You're constantly, stressed. And so we call this it's the doom cycle of leadership, that as a leader, you have to create a job that your people want. But the only way to create a job your people want is to engage them in a pattern of positive growth where they're putting forth the marginal effort required to make your job better. Because if I have 5 people on my team and I'm doing 10% of every one of their jobs, I'm at 150%.
Right.
And even if I can do it faster than them, I'm still at 130%. And I'm running out of steam. So as leaders, we have to learn to be a catalyst in the growth of our people, not an ingredient in the growth of our people. Catalysts, of course, they're still there at the end of the reaction, and most leaders feel like an ingredient. So if you're leading in that middle level, what you have to do is you have to filter what's coming from above you, because if you pass everything through, you just confuse the heck out of your people.
Right.
So I got to decide, what is it I'm trying to achieve? And what is my strategy for doing it? Like a lot of mid-level leaders, they think, well, I'm not in charge of strategy. Of course you are. Strategy is just the way you're going to proactively address the challenges that you are experiencing in your career or in your department. So, everybody has the ability to be strategic. I'm not setting the strategy for the business, but I'm setting the strategy for my group as to how I'm going to achieve those objectives.
Yeah.
So it's the same thought process of what do I need to achieve that my people would be passionate about? And how do I tie that to the organization's objectives? Because if it's not tied, they will pursue what's in their best interest.
Yes.
No matter how good a leader you are.
Yeah. With or without you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And likely without you. It's interesting you say that, because it's one of the things I think leaders get lost into, and managers and whatever title it's a role. We'll forget the thing about titles at the moment, but what is it that they do? What role are they playing? And it is that there can be confusion on, well, strategy is set, CEO said, and the marketing guys are doing this, and the sales team is selling this stuff, and therefore strategy's done. And there is that critical component where, as the leader of that team and with other humans in your custody, that you have to lean in, and you own the strategy in alignment with the direction, the outcomes that the organization is seeking to get to. So
correct. Yeah.
And that can be a big miss inside of organizations. And I would imagine there's probably times when you're working with teams, in particular, kind of that chewy nougat layer, that mid layer, right? That's a big aha moment for people.
Yeah. And because, what happens when we have a program we do, it's our flagship leadership development program called Leadershift.
Right.
And when a leader comes into that, they always say, I have no time. I've never met anybody who actually has enough time. If they have enough time, then they're not talking to me,
right,
or our organization, right? Because they don't have any problems. So that's not actually the problem. Time is never the problem. It's the symptom of the problem. And so what we're looking at is, okay, so what would you be spending your time on if you had more time? And the problem with most leaders is they just invest more time on emails and stuff that doesn't matter. Now, when it comes to time, you can either invest it or you can spend it. And if you're spending all your time, that's like spending your whole paycheck. You'll live a comfortable life, but you won't go anywhere.
Right.
You won't have anything invested that's going to pay you rewards into the future, right? So So we have to teach leaders how do you invest time? What does that look like? What does investing time as a leader look like? And we call them high payoff activities. And high payoff activities are the activities that are an investment in the future,
Right.
that are appropriate for your position.
Right.
So it's a balancing act, because you're flying the plane and fixing the plane as you go along, right? It's
Always. Yeah.
You don't get to land it and fix it. You got to keep flying it.
I know. We don't. It's not a helicopter. We just don't get to stop in midair.
No, you don't.
Wait. No. We are in motion. Yeah. It's one of my similar phrase. We're pouring cement while we're driving down the road. And what we're hoping is it's dry enough when we get there. We're hoping.
That's right.
And we're not gonna hit it and get stuck. I'm really enjoying this conversation. So I want to take just a minute. I've already violated the agreement that this was going to be a half-hour podcast. We're past it now, but I want to take a moment or two. I do want to talk about your book, 4 Faces of Frustration: How to Turn Frustration into Delight. And again, thank you for having one sit to me, and
my pleasure.
And it was fun to sit down and read this. I am at 2 points at this point, so I don't forget. I am gonna say, if you are a leader and you're listening to this, here's the cover. If you're listening to the audio version of this, you can't see the cover, but go to Amazon and search for Andrew Oxley and find this book and buy this book. It's a great read. It's a read that you can sit down over a weekend and read it. And then you can go back after that weekend and study it and think about it. So I would suggest that you go do this. Just one old man's advice. This is a good book. I enjoyed this book, in particularly since I've walked a mile in this CEO's shoes before. So I read this. I'll tell you, Andrew, I'm reading this about Jack, but see, I'm reading this and I'm going, shit, did he write this about me? Is this? I've been here. I was here for several years. What the heck? Anyway, except for that last piece where, my wife is still married to me and we're good to go. So I want to, without, going and turning this into, an extra long podcast, I would like to, and I know this is a component of your methodology. This isn't all of the methodology, but this is a piece of it.
Yeah.
I'd like to just, if you wouldn't mind, just kind of two things. The very first thing is what prompted you to tell this story, because it is a story. It is not a how to, and, with people cross their arms and lean back. This is a story.
Yeah.
What kind of prompted you to write this book, and a little bit about the 4 faces.
Right. Yeah. So I actually wrote it as a fable. And part of the reason I wrote it as a fable was I hate business books. I mean, I have about 400 or 500 sitting to my right in my library, but I hate them because they're boring. They're so boring and they're so dry. And I read a book by Eli Goldratt some years ago. It's called The Goal, and great book. And it was a fable. And I'm like, oh, that's a great way to write a book. And then Patrick Lencioni, of course, is famous for writing fables as well.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm going to write a fable because, so the 4 Faces of Frustration is a model we use within our programs. And I figured out a long time ago that models are very helpful to convey complex things in a simple way. And so it's a simple model that explains why you struggle with anywhere up to 75% of the people you interact with. Now, at best, you're going to struggle with about 25 to 30% of the people you interact with.
Sure.
You just might not know it. Somebody said to me one time, they said, what's it like to be on the other side of you? And I said, it's wonderful. He said, I know you think so. And I said, so we don't know what it's like to be on the other side.
No, we don't.
Like I say to leaders all the time, I'm like, do you struggle getting your people to do the things that you would have done when you were in their shoes? And they're like, yes. And I said, well, you know what the problem is, don't you? And they're like, no. I said, it's that you think you're normal and that they're abnormal.
Right.
I said, no, I'm not saying their responses are desirable or what you want, but they're not abnormal. Normal is a statistical reference to a likelihood of occurring.
Right.
And so there's no such thing as normative in behavior or communication. There's just different.
Yeah.
And if what I'm doing is not what you need, then doing more of it is probably not going to work. Like if you get in a cab in a foreign country and you speak French in an English accent or English in a French accent, it doesn't make you any more understandable, right?
Yes.
It just makes you look silly. So we tend to double down on things when we're frustrated.
Yeah.
And it's very, very predictable. You probably know people in your life that when they get frustrated, you know how they're going to act. You know what's going to happen. You can see you can see the signs, right? So the problem is for most of us, when we're frustrated, if we kept our antennas up and watched the other person to see if our message is landing with them, we might modify, but that's not what happens. For most of us, our antennas curl back down and we start focusing on what I'm feeling and what I'm thinking and what I'm trying to say, not whether it's landing with the person that we're talking to. So the model is all about how to recognize, this is not me across the table from me. And here's some simple things I can do differently in order to be able to communicate effectively.
Yeah. You very much enjoy, first of all, another shameless plug for the book. Very much enjoyed the book and that aspect, because I think that's lost on, we set normal based on who we are.
Yeah.
This is, it's funny, I was on a podcast a couple of months ago and it was 3 hours. It was a long podcast, Dan Bongino style, 3 hours. I thought,
Wow.
I don't even have that much stuff in my head. I don't know how much it's going to be worth to anybody. And the kind of the culmination of the event of the podcast really was that statement of things don't get done in the way I would do them.
Yeah.
The only person who can do them this way is me.
Correct.
And that discovery. So we actually had a coaching session afterwards, and I said, so let's get a glass of iced tea and let me help you with it. But it was really interesting in reading the book, and then the fact that they're associated with colors which makes it even easier to kind of get at. And Sam, I like the character Sam.
Yeah.
But let's go talk to the janitor. The janitor knows the real stuff. Let's go get that guy.
Yeah.
But one of the lessons I took out of there that I really, and so I would, in all seriousness, recommend the book. But one of the lessons I took out of there, Andrew, was humility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I believe that true greatness has at its core humility. I don't think you can truly be great at anything without some degree of humility, because humility unlocks gratefulness, gratitude, which leads to happiness. So humility is to be a really great leader. Now, can you be great without humility? Well, it depends how you define great, I suppose. Can you be effective? The way the world looks at it, maybe.
Yeah.
But I don't think you can engender the kind of loyalty that we truly desire from people, and the kind of legacy that we truly like. Years ago, I was working at Turner Broadcasting, and I was teaching this to a group there, and this young lady said to me, and I'd met Ted Turner a couple of times,
Interesting.
On the elevator. It's not like he came to see me. And anyway, so she said to me, does Ted Turner do this crap? And I said, I'm pretty sure he doesn't. She said, well, why the hell do we have to do it if Ted Turner doesn't do it and he owns the company? I said, because you're not Ted Turner. And I'm not sure that Ted Turner could be as successful today as he was doing what he does.
No, well said. Yeah.
So we're in a different world. Young people will not tolerate the crap that we put up with.
Right.
And by the way, Ted Turner was brilliant. And I'm not saying this young lady wasn't brilliant, but I suspect she wasn't in the same league as Ted Turner. I know I'm not. Most people aren't, right? So sometimes you get Steve Jobs, for example. People say, well, Steve Jobs didn't. I'm like, Steve Jobs was an anomaly. I don't think we should be setting the standards for how we lead off people who are enigmas, and they're just aberrations in the space.
Right. Yeah. Learn from them, but that is by far, that is by far the model. We're not walking that path.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. No, that's very cool. So I'm going to make a right turn.
Okay.
And we're coming to a point in the podcast where I want to I want to kind of focus in on a couple of things, and then we'll wrap up here in a minute or two. But the very first thing is with Oxley Group. I want to talk a little bit about the clients. So when we coach, and I tell my prospective clients all the time, like coaching it's bilateral, right?
Sure.
I may be a good fit for you, great, but you may not be a good fit for me. It's a unique relationship because coaching is all about. It becomes an intimate relationship over a period of time, to a degree, at least as much as my wife will let me. So, from that perspective, let's talk a little bit about your organization and the types of clients that you work with. And I know there's leadership. Let me say it correctly. My first call was at 5 a.m., so I've been talking for hours. Leadership elite. And there are programs involved, but let's talk about a little bit about the intent of the organization, who you like to work with, and if a company, they hear you and they go, this guy, I would like to know more, and go talk to Andrew, that they would know they're kind of a fit to come spend time with you.
Yeah. So it's interesting. When I started the company, I wanted to work just locally. I just wanted to work locally because I didn't want to travel. And then we got into with some really large clients, Progressive Insurance, another big one we worked with all across the country. And I was sitting on a plane at Hartsfield one day and I was like, dang it, I didn't want to travel. That's why I started this company, and I'm on the plane all the time now. We focused our business model, and we have a business model with the flagship development program called Leadership, which is not an event. It's a process that lasts about 4 months. It's very light interaction, but a lot of process. And we do that process with any mid to senior level leader that wants to gain more skill around, if they find they don't have time, they're frustrated with lack of engagement from their team. Their team isn't as motivated as they would like. Okay. They're having difficulty getting people to accept delegation. They have goals they're not able to reach. That's the program we work. And we work in cohort style programs, so you can send 1 to 3 leaders to that particular program. And it's a process because I don't believe events change people. Unless they're really ready. Like if they're ready, like going to see Bob in Vegas changed me.
Sure.
But I want it to be changed.
Sure.
And we teach people not just the psychology, but the practical how to. And I think that's where our leadership programs are a little bit different. We tie them to business results. We look at the how to, but we also look at the psychology of why we're doing what we're doing. And, there's a lot of psychology in leadership.
Yeah. Yes.
So that's leadership. Then we do some one-on-one coaching. I have a very small number of one-on-one coaching clients I have. It's intense. I just started one last week. It'll be, we have a limited number of spots for that because my time is I just have so much of it. And then we do strategic consulting with organizations, typically organizations from the $25 million to $250 million range, entrepreneur-led, founder-led, that want to achieve big things in the world. And we have a limited number of those we work with as well. But leadership is sort of like the flagship. It's the broad base that if you're experiencing challenges in the leadership realm, it's a good thing. Now, what we do for that is we actually give away our time initially. We actually do a 90-minute workshop for anybody who's interested in knowing more. Go to transformingresults.com. You can sign up for the workshop. And if you like what you hear about that, you can ask to speak to us, but we will not call you. We will not pester you at all. I learned a long time ago, if people don't want to talk to you, don't try to talk to you. So we'll just give away a bunch of content for 90 minutes, and help people understand. We call it the Leadership Blueprint Workshop, where we help them create a blueprint to bridge the gap between where they are and where they'd like to be.
Sure.
So that's, and then of course they get the book on Amazon, of course. So that's the model we use, Golan. It's, and actually this came from Bob. I was having trouble getting some clients at one time. He said, why don't you focus more on doing a really good job for the clients you have? I'm like, Bob, I need more clients. He's like, well, gosh, Andrew, maybe if you did a better job for the clients you have, you could get more clients. And so I was like, yeah, it's probably a good idea.
Dag nabbit.
So anyway, so that's what that's what I've been doing for 30 years, just trying to get better.
Yeah, it's funny that journey that we're on. So, well, that's very good. So for those of you listening to the podcast, in the show notes, I will include the links to the website, link to the Amazon book, links in Amazon, so you can just click the note. Depends upon what you're listening to. Some podcast players are more friendly than others. But if you're on YouTube or Spotify, you can click the links, and the links will take you everywhere you need to go. Rumble, Substack, it'll be the podcast is all over the place. And I would encourage you do reach out. It's funny you mention it, Andrew, because I do believe that it's with remember there's the laws, right? And there's a thing called the law of reciprocity.
That's
and
correct.
It is bound in that law that it is all about what we give, we get back.
That's right. Yeah.
And it is yet to fail me. So, on that note, I want to tell you, thank you and re-extend some gratitude for your time and for this conversation. I've had a great conversation. This has been fun. I've enjoyed meeting you and getting to know you and hearing what you talk about. We could go on and on and on for a long time.
Thank you. And I've enjoyed being on your podcast.
Yeah, thank you. So listeners, two things. The very first thing is, please give the podcast, depending on where you are in the platform, a no, like, share, follow, do those kinds of things. Depends upon what the button is, whether it's a finger or a star. There's all kinds of ways to do that. It has nothing to do with a vanity number. It has to do with the fact that allows the podcast to become visible, and it serves a second mission, which is to empower 1 million leaders. And through empowering 1 million leaders, it's not Dolan's mission, it's all of our mission. So if you know 2 leaders or managers who are coming up into their careers and can learn something from something that Andrew said today, share the podcast with them. Send them the podcast and send it with a personal note and say, hey, you need to listen to these guys. This Andrew guy seemed to know what he's talking about. So please do share the podcast. And as always, thank you for listening to the Next Interview Show. I'm personally grateful. And again, Andrew, thank you for being a part of my mission to empower 1 million leaders. And hopefully we get to go do that success together. So
it was a great pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for tuning in to the Next Interview Show. If today's conversation gave you something to think about or something to act on, follow the show. And share this episode with a leader you know who's ready to step up, because empowered leadership isn't a solo sport.